boost the trust in science among citizens, and ensure access to science under the concept of open science. Join us in the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development, fostering science for all.
Thank you very much, and I think I have a presentation, if I can have my presentation. And again, sorry, it's a professor's problem. It's hard for me to speak with a presentation from there, so if you don't mind, I'm going to speak from here, if it's all right. Can I have my presentation in? Is there the changing slides? So, thank you very much. As the video introduced, the major topic of this incredible opportunity that is the decade of sciences for sustainable development is really how can we foster science for all. And I think since yesterday, as this dialogue started, this has been key to all the discussions that we have had since yesterday until today. And therefore, in our view, and I have to see if the technology is right, no? So basically, we already mentioned that it was the UN General Assembly that decided in 2023 that we needed a decade. And in effect, it was the great follow-up of the International Year of Basic Sciences, where the realization that we need more and more science and technology to address some of the key issues that we face as humanity, that promote the idea of having this 10-year journey to really, really invest in science for all. And we launched this decade in a special forum in Latin America, the CELAC Forum, where we had several ministers and representatives of countries to really discuss what kind of interaction, what kind of structure, what kind of mechanisms and frameworks we should build in order to have a successful, no? Sorry, guys. Yes. So based on that, the idea is that we really need not only the sciences, but also a societal science culture in order to really make sure that science and technology can support our ambition for a more sustainable, for a more equal world. And that means, in effect, that during the decade, we have to engage all the societal actors that have a playing in order to make sure that our development agendas are really based in science evidence, and that can use the technologies that as humanity we are promoting. Based on that, we defined basically 5 outcomes, and just the panel before and the chair mentioned at the end, we need science literacy. If we want to use correctly the technologies, if we can understand what science is telling us, we need to have societies that really have a culture of science and that really are science literate. We also need, and ISC presented yesterday the Science Missions Initiative, and we need knowledge that is actionable, that really address the Sustainable Development Goals, that address the major challenges that we are facing as humanity and as planet. But we also know that we need basic science for many of these new discoveries. Yesterday, someone said that maybe we should not invest in basic sciences. We really believe that we do need to continue to invest in basic sciences because they are the sciences that really allows for breakthroughs in other science fields and in particular in technology. As you know, UNESCO is a big defender of open science. We have been discussing that also today, this morning. The representative, His Excellency, from Oman, from the Technology and Innovation Ministry, said we need a science that is more open, more accessible, more inclusive. And that's the open science framework. and the recommendation of UNESCO. And it's not a small endeavor to really promote a more open system, ecosystems of science and technology, but it's something that we have to address and embrace. And of course, the issue of how are we setting our science and innovation ecosystems in order for them to really be more responsive and more responsible to the needs and the contributions that we can give to society for sustainable development. So it means also transformation of the national and regional ecosystems in order to make them more open, to make them more relevant, to make them more engaging also with communities, but also with decision making, and therefore building the trust of science that we are all talking about. And that's why we decided that we needed a very open and very flexible structure for this decade in order to engage all the stakeholders. And so you can see that we have an executive committee. ISC is one of the members of that committee, but we also have working groups. We have advisory committees that look at the initiatives that will use the logo of the decade. But we also want national committees and national initiatives. So the idea is that all of us have a saying as a contribution to the decade, be it at local, national, regional, global level. And UNESCO is the secretariat, and of course we are setting the frame so that you can participate. And one of that is really the calls. We have already issued the first call for initiatives to be registered under the decade and using our logo, and they will be part of our report to the UN General Assembly in 2026. And you can see the first call that finished in December last year had already 221 proposals, initiatives from national to global initiatives, and very distributed also. So we are very happy that we are seeing a huge response from all countries. And this is interesting because some of them come from science academies, some come from science unions, some come from government institutions. So there is really a mixture of partners in joint. Some comes from even private sector companies that have a say on this. So we here explains to you more or less what these initiatives should be. They should contribute, of course, to the decade's objectives and outcomes. Of course, it has to be science and technology sound. It's a science decade. We also need to make sure that it's sustainable, that is a funding structure, that is about building partnerships, about inclusivity, and how can we really bring the SDGs at the agenda. And the commitments, of course, is about knowledge sharing, open science, gender considerations, reporting, and of course, being part of the decade as a whole. So I thank you very much and looking forward to the discussion, and welcome to the Decade of Science for Sustainable Development. I don't know if someone else is going to use.
Thank you very much for that framing, Lydia. That's great. I'd like to invite another of the partners in the decade, which is the Earth Humanity Coalition, to come and explain a bit more about the coalition. Speaking on behalf of that will be Sylvia Ponce-Dawson, and she'll give us a bit of a framing of, and an idea of the partners, many of whom are IEC members that are involved in this initiative. Thanks.
Thank you. I need my presentation. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, so I don't need this then, I guess. Thank you. On? Yes. Okay. Thank you for the invitation to talk about the Earth Humanity Coalition. Let me see. Okay. So you know that the decade grew out of the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development. I am now the president of the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics. that played a key role mobilizing other unions for the declaration of the International Year. And after the year, which was very successful, this idea of asking the UN General Assembly to approve the declaration of a decade came up. And so, but then when this idea appeared, everybody had realized that basic sciences was not enough, because there are challenges that humanity needs to overcome for a healthier planet that is with everybody living well, and needs everything, not just basic sciences. And this is reflected in the Declaration of the United Nations. It says that these challenges require a more effective and inclusive approach based on synergistic cooperation of all sciences, basic and applied, as well as social and human sciences, including traditional knowledge, enabling the development of technology, innovation, and education. And so this language and the ambitions of this declaration are they are at the basis of this Earth Humanity Coalition. And the ambitions of the Earth Humanity Coalition is to achieve an integrated knowledge mobilization, collaborating across all sciences, including traditional and indigenous knowledge, and also focus on sustainability driven by equality and well-being for all in healthy territories. And in particular, we are talking about regenerative development, integrating the SDGs in an approach that is much more ambitious. Now, we have to reimagine the role of science, how science responds to the needs of humanity, and improve the integration between the scientific community and also governance and policy making. And so these impact goals want to transform how science is practiced and how it connects with policymakers. And this needs reframing the processes of research and innovation and the nexus between science and society. Now, what about the Earth Humanity Coalition? Is a global bottom-up network that connects and mobilizes all kinds of organizations. Now it's about 50 now. The IUPAP is one of them. And it also brings together transdisciplinary hubs that are located everywhere in the world. And it's a means to foster these transformative actions at multiple scales, from local to global, and to leverage existing efforts. And it's a complementary partner of UNESCO, of the ISC, and of other organizations that are interested in advancing with the SDGs. Now, creating the conditions for this transformative change, there are some goals that we want to achieve. One of them is to co-create a web of Earth Humanity Sciences, establishing a global network of transdisciplinary hubs for sustainable development. In particular, one of the ideas is to establish open repositories of useful material using Zenodo, which is an open repository that is based at CERN in Switzerland, and also promote the collaboration across cultures and disciplines, and extend the culture that underlies collaboration in some big science projects that those that are carried out by CERN in Switzerland, and also the spirit of collaboration that international scientific unions practice. They want to expand that to other areas. And so embrace science and wisdom for collective responsibility and creativity, and redefine human development within the boundaries of the Earth, and view Earth as a living whole, emphasizing unity and interdependence. So the added value that the Earth Humanity Coalition brings to this endeavor is this cooperative and open attitude that is carried by the unions, this holistic knowledge integration, the bottom-up construction, the way it's mobilizing infrastructures worldwide, and also the focus on equality fair future and planetary reconciliation at all territorial scales. Now it's working together, I told you, with UNESCO and the ISC, and is also partnering with the Club of Rome and the UNESCO Most Bridges Coalition and the World Academy of Art and Science to advance with these goals. IUPAP has a very active role in this Earth Humanity Coalition, and the International Decade is hosting for the moment the coalition, like it did for the International Year. And it's also advancing some collective efforts, and in particular, it recently created a working group on physics for climate change action and sustainability that is planning to organize a major conference on regenerative development in 2027 that we expect will be a milestone for the decade. Now, the current steering group of the Earth Humanity Coalition is composed by Michel Spiro, who is now the past president of IUPAP. I forgot to correct that. He's the past president. I am the president now. And he's the chair of this steering committee. And then Carlos Alvarez Pereira from the Club of Rome, Leslie Green from the University of Cape Town in South Africa, Stephen Hartman from the UNESCO Most Bridges Coalition. He's from Sweden. Nebojsa Janeskovic, the World Academy of Arts and Sciences in Serbia, Marianne Kasna from the University in Ghana, Prajwal Shastri from the Raman Research Institute in India. Luc Almond is the coordinator, as he was the coordinator of the Year of Basic Sciences, and Raad Shah is the program coordinator from the Club of Rome. So with this, I leave you and I thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Silvina, for that overview. It's also great to have broad partners working with us on this, and one of those partners is the Frontiers Planet Prize, who's working at highlighting some of these sustainability issues. And we have two speakers from this prize who will share some of the work that they're doing with us on these social transformations to sustainability. First is Daniel Muth. Please go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here. In this short presentation, I will discuss how using an interdisciplinary approach helps me research issues of environmental sustainability in a more comprehensive way, and why it is instrumental in making policy recommendations. Looking through the lens of political economy, I analyze climate policy development, largely focusing on carbon pricing. And carbon pricing has long been considered and praised by economists as the most cost-effective solution to tackle climate change. Despite this, taxing carbon pollution is not a popular policy, since it has a reputation of not being fair socially nor very effective environmentally. For these very reasons, political scientists advocate for climate measures where the costs of action are less visible to individuals and companies, making them easier to implement politically. Economists puzzle over the question why carbon pricing is so difficult to transfer from university lecture halls to the policy arena when it's so appealing in theory. At the same time, political scientists wonder why are economists so determined to promote carbon pricing when it remains unpopular? However, by integrating these two disciplines, we may find solutions that make carbon pricing economically efficient, politically appealing, and socially tolerable. In my carbon pricing research, which was awarded the Frontiers Planet Prize last year, I analyzed how the revenue generated by carbon pricing can be used to enhance the political acceptability of these policies. And through comparing 30 national level policies, I found that countries using carbon pricing revenue to compensate groups that suffered negative effects from carbon taxes and to fund additional climate projects are able to charge higher carbon prices. And this is true even when the countries have high income inequality and dependence on fossil fuels, or other structural conditions that make implementing ambitious climate policy very challenging. This finding, I believe, is crucial because it has great policy implications. First, it shows us that integrating social considerations into climate policy development is essential. And second, carefully crafted policy design can make implementing higher carbon prices possible even in unlikely political environments. So how to move forward? Countries, regions, and cities differ significantly from one another. That is why we cannot expect that the same compensation or climate measure will work universally. For example, in countries where more people live in or close to energy poverty, greater compensation is required to prevent hardship and possible social backlash after implementing carbon pricing. And that is why we need to engage with diverse local stakeholders directly affected by climate policy changes, because this engagement helps us to understand their concerns, identify sustainable solutions they would support, and explore ways for domestic companies to stay competitive despite rising carbon pricing, among other social considerations. And this kind of communication and cooperation is a step towards transdisciplinary approach in which policymakers, scientists, and local communities all work together to develop effective, inclusive, and perhaps revolutionary solutions. In my understanding, this is the next indispensable step in the process. To conclude, it is increasingly clear that the way economic and political power are addressed, along with people's perceptions on climate policy fairness, have a profound impact on the stringency of sustainability policies. Interdisciplinary research highlights the importance of the social considerations shaping climate policy development and offers holistic strategies to address these challenges effectively. I believe that any research aimed at achieving this efficiently should be encouraged, supported, and widely shared. And this research agenda also closely aligns with discussions here over the last few days, that science-based policies are not always practical unless perceived to be fair, and new approaches must be interdisciplinary, problem-driven, solution-focused, and open to collaborative knowledge creation to tackle growing sustainability challenges more effectively. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Daniel, for that sort of specific intervention and a window on some of the social change that will be required for this agenda. The next presentation is by Mia Strand. We have a video from her because she was unable to travel today.
Hi, everyone. I'm very sad not to be there with you today, but I really appreciate the opportunity to still contribute to this really important session on the Decade of Science for Sustainability. My pitch is about transdisciplinary research and thinking about who is informing the science that we depend on for sustainable development. My name is Mia Strand, and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Nelson Mandela University in Gqeberha, South Africa. So I just want to talk very briefly about transdisciplinarity and the need for transdisciplinarity in the decade and for the future agenda. So what we see is that interdisciplinarity is not necessarily enough when it comes to considering who is informing the science that we depend on, particularly when it comes to considering sustainability agenda that is inclusive of views that are currently perhaps not as represented in what we define as sustainability or sustainable development. Part of the argument or the thinking around transdisciplinarity is this idea of rethinking, reimagining how we produce knowledge and how we produce science. It's recognizing that not all truths or not answers residing within the academies or within academic institutions, and rather we need to collaborate with non-academic partners in the process of producing better and more solution-oriented and more inclusive knowledge for sustainable development. Transdisciplinarity can be defined in different ways. In my work, we see it as transcending the disciplines to work with non-academic collaborators, partners, or what we often call co-researchers. And part of this terminology or this wording is important because it's not necessarily just engaging with people as research participants, as a lot of traditional knowledge would do, but actually bringing in people as equal partners, which means that they would be part of the whole process of designing the research project, informing the data, but also disseminating the results at the end. This is important to consider that transdisciplinarity does not become just another kind of terminology or an approach that is exploitative or extractive of local or private industries' knowledge and knowledge systems, but actually brings that in on an equal basis. So part of transdisciplinarity, for it to be transformative, for it to be inclusive, needs to actually consider existing power hierarchies and power dynamics in research processes. A lot of the research and science that we depend on is still perpetuating aspects of parachute science or coming into a context, extracting knowledge without that knowledge benefiting the local communities that actually hold this knowledge through their knowledge systems. And part of the work also includes considering aspects of legitimacy, whose viewpoints or whose knowledge systems are seen as truth, and how do we shift those boundaries if those are problematic or one-way hierarchy. Part of the transformative potential of transdisciplinarity is actually consolidating various views, beliefs, cultures, and knowledge systems. And even though it might not find that everyone has the same opinions, you can consolidate part of it. And through conflict or through disagreement, you can find what we call dissonance. And pulling out common objects that we have, for example, for a sustainability agenda. What is important with transdisciplinarity, particularly for it to be transformative and inclusive, is that it needs investment in relationships. We recently published a blue paper on co-producing sustainable ocean plans with Indigenous and traditional knowledge holders. And through a year of conversations and discussions, we found that actually the core thing is the relationships that you build, the trust that you build. And so it's really important that for this process to be inclusive and equitable, you need investment in this time. Influenced by the work of Max Neff and others thinking about kind of weak and strong transdisciplinarity, in my own work, I talk about partial or comprehensive transdisciplinarity. And I think this is also one of the aspects bringing in the power and legitimacy considerations into this work. What I see for us to move towards a more inclusive decade of science for sustainability, we need to actually consider how we can work overlapping with non-academic partners in our work, and how we can actually move and steer those perceived power and perceived legitimacy to be on an equal level in the process. So that's just the thing to think about more. Then finally, I want to end with some questions. I do not think we have necessarily all the answers, but that's part of it, is thinking together and advancing this kind of approaches together. And I think part of what we need to look into more is who is currently benefiting from our science for sustainable development. How can we center inclusivity and equity in this science? Who has not been included before, and how do we make sure that they're included more than others? Who is informing the science that informs our sustainability agenda and agendas? Are parts of that outdated? Does it need to be updated? Can we have sustainability without equity? I would argue no. And how do we ensure that our wealth of solutions that we already have inspire meaningful action? How can we bring in decision makers, policy makers, private industries into our transdisciplinary research to center action and solutions? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mia, for raising those thought-provoking questions, and just a huge congratulations to Daniel and Mia for winning the prize. So, in the spirit of collaboration and working together, we have also the geo-unions have gotten together and brainstormed a bit about some ideas that they might like to put towards the Decade for Sciences for Sustainability. And I'd like to invite Nathalie Lemarchand to come and present some of those ideas from the geo-unions.
Thank you, Vanessa. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here with you to give you a brief overview of the GeoUnions network and what role can it play in shaping future scientific agendas in terms of sustainable development. But firstly, let me to add some words to the introduction of Vanessa. As told, I am the current president of IGU, International Geographical Union. I succeeded to Mike Meadows at this position in August 2024 after 2 mandates as vice president and the later years as first vice president. I was elected during IGU Congress as were new members of the executive. As a team coming from 11 different countries, we look forward to the scientific challenges ahead. Mike Meadows is the current president of GeoUnions, but sadly, he was unable to be with us in person today. So I'm sure you will accept his apologies given his scientific achievements as well as interest in ISC. He is online and I'm happy to say hello to him on your behalf. This being said, as much as I'm confident to succeed him as IGU president with a wonderful diverse executive team, I do not feel as confident in replacing him today for the presentation of GeoUnions networks. The reason is simple. GeoUnion has been of utmost importance for him as a scientist because physical geography is his specialty. And GeoUnion is firstly a network of physical unions. But now perhaps it will be changed, I hope. And nobody is perfect. I'm a social human geographer. But Mike and I, as most geographers, look to increase collaborations between the human, social, and physical geographies. As all of you would recognize, given the state of the planet and of human perspective, this is more than welcome in geography and in science in general. All thanks Mike, who has remained very active in this presentation. I learned more on GeoUnions, and I hope you will do as much. And also because all representatives of each union are here with us in this room. The GeoUnions is a network of 10 representatives of the International Scientific Unions of the International Science Council, ISC, dealing with Earth and space sciences. Although it is difficult to trace back to when international cooperation in Earth and space sciences began, we can underline that at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th, there were more and more interdisciplinary scientific collaboration as a premises of this formal network. Then, under the umbrella of the International Council for Science, ISSU, the GeoUnions network became actively implicated in the Future Earth initiative launched in 2012 and in the Integrated Research on Disaster Risk, IRDR, program, both initiated by the ICSU in relation with the United Nations Agency. In 2004, the network decided to take a new step in its formalization with the creation of the steering committee to promote the sciences worldwide, to communicate and to coordinate scientific activities of individual unions. The accelerating impact of climate change, natural disasters, epidemic risks, the growing importance and urgency of societal problems, food safety, and more broadly, consumer issues made this step necessary. These questions are more and more urgent today, and also in the perspective of the post-2030 agenda. And to prepare this session, Mike Meadows asked to each discipline including the network to each union, with different disciplines, included in the network to answer at that question. How can the disciplines represented by your union contribute to and shape its thinking about the role of science in future sustainability agendas? Thank you, all of you, for your replies. On the basis of this, we can draw up three main approaches. One group focuses on particular elements of the Earth system, a second group focuses on methods, and a third focus on the relationship between the Earth system and the societies. The first group of unions that focus on particular elements of the Earth system are International Union of Geodesy and Geophysics, IUGG, that you can see here with the slide, and International Union of Soil Sciences, IUSS, that you can see also here. Also, International Union of Speleology, UIS. We can also add International Union of Geological Sciences, IUGS, and International Astronomical Union, IAU. And also we can add International Union for Quaternary Research, INQUA, that pays more attention to the way the system has changed over time. Relatively recently, geographically speaking. The role of this group is probably mainly to try to understand how the Earth works and, albeit secondary objective, how these processes interact with and are impacted by human activities. There is a second group with International Cartographic Association, that you can see here. Also, International Society for Remote Sensing and Photogrammetry, on the other side. And also International Union of Radio Sciences, URSI, that are focused substantially on methods that can apply to map and analyze patterns on processes of the Earth system, including how it changes over time due to the natural or anthropogenic processes. And finally, there is not exactly a group because there is only one union. It's IGU, International Geographical Union. It explores the relationship between Earth system processes and their complex relationships with society, culture, and economy. In fact, the nature of geography is not to be between one side or the other, social or physical sciences, but by definition, geography is with the both. This overview of how each union members of geo-unions see how their union can contribute to and shape its thinking around the role of science in future sustainability agendas. However, beyond this perspective, addressing IDSD and the post-2030 sustainability agenda should lead to a recognition that it's better to work together beyond disciplinary silos. There is a need to improve our understanding of relationship between physical processes and the social sciences in general. It is better that this understanding is not simply bolt-on, but fully integrated. We need deep theoretical understanding, we need methods and techniques, but we also need to get better at applying this to the sustainability crisis. To conclude, I would like to come back to the social and physical geographies. Geography has a long story of dealing with both, but recent trends in science has kept us busy dealing with one or the other. This is that we can see today. There is indeed an incentive in geography and in sciences in general to work together to better understand the interactions by enhancing scientific endeavor to deepen our understanding of nature and humanity. It would certainly contribute to better understanding on what sustainability and sustainabilities can mean. Well, one can say, after all, that may be why Mike asked me to replace him at this presentation. Thank you for all your attention.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And so we'd like to open up the discussion a little bit now. See, there's already a question from the floor. So let's start with that right in the front, and then at the second table as well.
Thank you. The International Science Council's been proud to be a partner right from the start, working with Lydia and UNESCO on the planning of the International Decade. And right from the start, I think Lydia and I both saw that there were two aspects. We've talked a lot today about the delivery of science to make a change. But the other aspect of the decade, which has been indirectly alluded to in each of the presentations, is what needs to happen within the science system itself. And the ISC, even before the decade, was starting to work on the issue of what are the barriers to the transdisciplinary approaches that are needed in research to actually make real progress on the decade. And one of the presentations, the presentation online, highlighted the issues around transdisciplinary research. It's very different in the way it's performed. The process is as much as the actual result. The process is, in fact, the key bit of research. So the ISC's done quite a lot of work, led by Matthias Kaiser and myself, on thinking through the barriers that exist. And the barriers exist are structural. How funders operate, how universities and employers operate, what kind of outputs are counted as being meriting for promotion or tenure. The time it takes, as one of the presenters pointed out, can take 1-2 years to build the trust, and that has to be funded and taken into account in building the research. So there's some fundamental issues which we've got to achieve in the decade within science itself, if the promise of the decade to deliver science to make sustainability is to be achieved. And the ISC is taking the lead. There'll be a paper in Nature Sustainability in a few weeks describing these barriers and what needs to happen, and working with the Global Forum of Funders and with UNESCO, with its role in influencing governmental funders, because that's what the UNESCO is an intergovernmental organisation. I think we have to admit that in the next 2-3 years, we have to find a way to break the impasse, the focus on bibliometrics, the focus on short-term traditional outputs, which are actually slowing science from really making a difference in the sustainability agenda. So I'm sure Lydia will want to comment more, but I have to say that the partnership with UNESCO and ISC has, through the last 18 months, grown to be so much stronger, and it's the decade of sustainability that is part of the framework of a much renewed relationship.
Thank you. Before we respond to that, there was one more question. There we go. Thank you.
At the end of the decade, in 2032 to 2033, will be the International Polar Year. I'm not sure that it's part of one of the initiatives, but the decade itself provides a runway to develop this international transdisciplinary effort. If we look at the polar regions in specific, the Arctic, it's a region where open science itself is compromised. There is limited dialogue between the United States and Russia in specific. The analogy is the third International Polar Year, the International Geophysical Year. In the 1950s, it allowed the United States and the Soviet Union to think in terms of cooperation, leading to the 1957-58 IGY. I imagine that the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainability could accomplish exactly the same type of progress to facilitate cooperation where dialogues are currently absent. I would welcome your response.
Thank you. So can I offer, please go ahead, Lydia.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and also ISC for the tremendous collaboration, but also Earth Coalition and all the unions that are really joining in bringing this decade to fruition. And indeed, there are two major objectives of the decade. One is related to society and policy-making processes, and that's why we talk about a culture of science, science literacy, critical thinking, the necessary to use science. But the other objective, as Peter mentioned, is related to us, the scientific community and the science ecosystems. How can we really transform, and I think the first presentation mentioned that, how to transform the way we produce knowledge, how do we bring co-design, co-production of knowledge, and involvement of the different stakeholders and beneficiaries from the beginning, the indigenous knowledge aspects that you mentioned. And so clearly these are two major objectives, and then under these objectives there are the 5 outputs. But again, it's a decade, it's a 10-year journey. This is the beginning. It's not set in stone. It means, again, co-design, co-production, co-action in order to achieve the transformation that we need both on the science communities, but also on society and on the decision-making areas. And then Paul mentioned the International Year of Polar, but we have many international years, and indeed, and we have many science decades also, and UNESCO has been very proud to lead all these initiatives. We are already on the 4th year of the Ocean Science Decade, also led by UNESCO, and we learned a lot from this decade in order to design the Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development. We are launching next week the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology, a major achievement also, very much aligned with the objectives of the decade. And in effect, the idea is to use the international years to really accelerate some areas of transformation under the objectives and outcomes of the decade. We are launching also the International Year of Glacier Preservation and the International Decade of Claustrophilia Sciences. And again, UNESCO very much the leading agency on these both initiatives. And it's again 2025. So clearly the International Polar Year will be a huge opportunity to continue to really highlight the importance of what we know in terms of scientific knowledge, knowledge in general, and what are the gaps of knowledge that we need to bridge in order to make sure that we can have the right action in order to protect the poles or the glaciers or the water. And in that respect, I think you are absolutely right. One of the major challenge, and I would say also ambition, of this decade, and that's why we say fostering science for all, we should maybe add science for all as a common good, as a public good, and clearly bringing a common vision, a common interest around major scientific initiatives is going to be crucial if these international years and international decades want to have really the impact. We cannot continue to see separation on the scientific community. We are launching this March the Science Diplomacy Initiative, Paul, as I mentioned to you, and clearly part of the ambition on this initiative is how can we guarantee that we are not divided when we are co-design and co-producing the knowledge we need for sustainable development. We can't afford to be divided on that endeavor, and I think the experience of your center, it's very welcomed, and the way you look at things. So clearly, decades and international years, they work in synergy, and luckily we have the lead of the Secretariat, so it's our job to make sure that all these initiatives are indeed working together and building the momentum that will make these declarations really important. And of course, you have the Pact of the Future that again brings science clearly to development and peace building. And then you have the first decision of the Security Council on science for peace. So if we look to the world today, they are asking the science community to do something, to really, really start responding to the needs of society, of the planet, and I think we need to respond. So my call to all of you, through the decades, through the international years, through the different initiatives that we have under the decade, such as the Science Diplomacy Initiative, but many others, the Science Literacy, the Biodiversity Initiative, we have several initiatives under the decade. Please, let's join efforts, because there is a strong call, including from policymakers, that we say they don't trust science. They are calling on us to do the difference. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Lydia. Do you want to add something, Silvina?
Yes, I wanted to say something about the two interventions. First, about the co-creation and transdisciplinarity. I think we need a little bit of a change of culture within the scientific community. First, to be able to talk as equals for this co-creation with and learn from the indigenous knowledge. And something that I noticed is that many of these co-creation projects are led by women, I guess because maybe women are more used to listen rather than trying to impose their views. So that's something to take into consideration. Of course, there is a lot of changes that are needed with respect to funding, so that there should be more funding lines for that type of research. But also that type of research should be valued by the scientific agencies. In particular, we had a session yesterday that addressed the issue of evaluation of scientists. And I guess even if many agencies start to say that we should evaluate in different ways, the scientific community keeps on evaluating its own members with the usual ways of evaluation. So there is a major restructuring of our way of thinking, of relating with other people, and of evaluating our own performance that needs a lot of training and dialogue, I think. With respect to the other question or comment, I'm going to refer to how to try to cross the barriers that many times are imposed by governments because they are strained with one another. IUPAP has a long tradition of trying to bridge the gaps and bring together scientists from different countries, and in particular, well, that it played a key role during the Cold War for that. And now we again have challenges, and sometimes the scientific communities get into putting barriers for the collaboration, like it happened with people with Russian affiliation after the Ukraine war. And IUPAP now offers for people who want to attend conferences that are related to IUPAP, the IUPAP affiliation, so that they can be accepted in the conferences, because people with Russian affiliation sometimes are not even allowed to register into conferences. And also we offer the IUPAP affiliation for the publication of papers for people with institutions in certain countries that are prevented from publishing. So I think that there is a role for the scientific community to try to break those barriers, even though I guess they are getting more and more complicated to break, especially after, I guess, the US elections show that maybe there is going to be more barriers. But I think it's a role for the scientific community to find ways to keep on collaborating across, all over the world, and be creative, finding the ways to do it. Of course, we cannot be naive and forget that there are geopolitical interests, economic interests, but still, we think, at least within IUPAP, that scientific collaboration is a driver for peace, and we should try to do our best to keep on doing all of this.
Thank you. Can we take another 2 questions from the audience? There's a guy right at the front here. Have you got a microphone already, please?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to offer some thoughts. I think we need to fix our own mindset, meaning the community of scientists. What may have happened in the last couple of centuries is the apparent success of the industrial model has created a perception that nature is something that we can exploit without paying anything back. So we have now an understanding of nature that seems to be materialistic and mechanical, and therefore linear and open to exploitation almost without limit. I think we need to think differently if you want to achieve more progress in the next decade by doing this. What if we see nature as a person? Just like us, nature is purposeful. And nature does not like to be exploited. And when we engage with nature, we treat nature with trust and respect. Then we can communicate to the rest of the world that scientists are able to create more trust. How so? What if we actually give back to nature what is due to nature? And we protect the ecosystems that are highly complex, highly nonlinear, with respect. That we do not make assumptions about what nature can give and what we can take. So I think this is a sort of mindset that we may want to think about for the next decade. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll leave our panelists to think for a moment about a response to that. And can we take another question there? Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the discussion. My name is Georg Gartner. I'm president of the International Cartographic Association. I would summarize the discussion that all in this audience here are agreeing on that we are doing a lot of science for sustainability. And we keep on doing so eventually. But I think that the problem eventually is how we communicate this. Where do the stakeholders, the policymakers, the public really know about what we are doing? And also the constraints and the limitations. In every session we hear about the topic trust. I guess with us in this room, we trust ourselves because we know our limitations. So I really think the key point is to communicate better. And I think it might be a good idea to have a one-stop shop also for the International Science Council, to think about something like a dashboard or an atlas. As everything happens somewhere, an atlas or a dashboard, a geo-based, might be a good idea to communicate better about what's ongoing with the SDGs. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Natalie, or any particular response?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question, and I totally agree with you. And it's why also I think that it's very important to improve a science, a social science or social science side inside each discipline, because this is also a way to include, in my point of view, the society, and not only the societies, but also the citizen. And because by this way we can reinforce the link between science and the citizen and people, and yes, citizens, but also consumer. Because in my point of view, it's not only, and I think this is the same for many sciences unions. We have not only in societies citizen, because always we think about citizen, how we can to be linked, how we can communicate with citizens. But citizens are also consumer, and we can see when we work on the climate change, on the new way to live, to work, that there is like a gap between to think as citizen and to act as consumer. And I think it's very important to include the society's people in our researches, because to communicate with them, it's a good thing to publish, to vulgarize, to have a large by festival, etc. But the science society, the link with science society, with action research, this is also a good way to have this communication and to change the way we act in the planet. I think.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Citizen science. One of the things that we have been promoting quite a lot, and in particular in our UNESCO designated sites, is how do we involve the communities that live in these sites, in particular the young percentage of these communities, to get involved on the monitoring of changes, for example, in relation to the impact of climate change, in terms of water quality, water quantity, loss of biodiversity, disasters and impact of natural disasters. And what you do by doing so, you not only, as you were saying, engage them in the co-creation and production of the knowledge, but they become responsible citizens, because they can see the impact of deforestation, of not sustainable agricultural practices, etc., etc. So it's also about creating, as you were saying, this conscience that it's our responsibility of all of us at all levels to really keep our planet safe. And a lot of the local initiatives, it's where the transformation starts. It's sometimes very hard for a very high level to start transformation of behavior. You need to go to really local communities and make a difference. And citizen science, in our view, is really working wonders.
Thanks. I think I want to use this opportunity actually just to direct the conversation a little bit, because this idea of local initiatives and building from the ground up is a really useful one. But I think with something as big as a decade, you also run the risk potentially of having a number of small initiatives, but leaving the sort of big leverage things, which are very hard problems to solve. Some of them are the ones raised, by Peter, of leaving those kind of for last or unattended. And so what I think from your positions in the panel are things that we can do both to align, the agenda for the decade in what we really want to achieve in terms of sustainability, but also some of the mechanisms and the pressure points across the stakeholders, the funders, our own unions and academies, our own communities in terms of publishing and research assessment. What are some of the ways that we can see that kind of alignment to work towards the big changes that we want to see over the decade? Lydia will start and then we'll go through.
Thank you very much. Peter already mentioned one of the meetings we will have next week or in March with donors and funders of big science initiatives. I think this is one of the areas that we have to work. Yesterday, in the first panel, there was this idea, can we have like an investment bank to really support large science initiatives? We need those kinds of facilities, and I would say it's something that we need to pursue, how to build a science investment facility, in particular for the Global South, where you don't have infrastructure, not enough human capacity, and to really make science global and also relevant for all. Also, we have several initiatives already linked to science literacy. That is a huge challenge. How do you bring that? It's not only about STEM education, science communication. It's really how do we influence education systems to really educate the new generations with a much more capacity to interpret the world we live by using, and by having skills that are related to scientific thinking. And these are huge endeavors, but we, as UNESCO, we are already putting in place some initiatives that will address those big questions on the decade. But again, we can't do that alone. We will need not only the scientific community, but we'll also need governments to really embrace the importance of these transformations.
So, can we go with Daniel first and then we'll...
Thank you. So we talk a lot about barriers, but I think we also developed and accumulated so much knowledge about how to do this efficiently. For example, one of the questions was about trust. And yesterday we listened to a really inspiring presentation from Joe, how to scale up a successful small project to involve more stakeholders. And I think this is one of the possible solutions to scaling up existing projects. But also at my university, at Vrije University at Amsterdam, Environmental Sciences Department, I think inter- and transdisciplinary research is rather monodisciplinary research is rather a rule than an exception. So most of the projects we are working are interdisciplinary. And for example, we have the Perfect Storm project where natural scientists study floods after droughts, so-called superstorms, and social scientists work with local communities how to prepare for these events efficiently, and they are part of the discussion. So, and the kind of developing this project starts with education, and we have interdisciplinary programs where students study earth sciences, but at the same time climate politics, climate governance, international climate law. So for them, working in an interdisciplinary project is actually natural, and they know how to develop a common language at the beginning of a project to avoid, kind of miscommunication. So I think it starts with education and also kind of developing a culture where it's natural.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something because you were asking what the ISC could do. I think that also the ISC could help develop communities and networking in regions where the scientific community is not so developed. So let me refer to Latin America and the Caribbean because I am also part of the liaison committee of the regional focal point. And it's a very diverse, it's not that diverse, but it is diverse at the same time. But it's also very diverse in terms of how developed the science is between countries and also inside countries. And I think that the ISC could promote the leveraging of communities that are not that well developed, because for the transdisciplinary efforts, you need to have a scientific community that is part of the dialogue. And so I think that all the efforts to try to promote and nurture community building, scientific community building, help develop their infrastructure and see ways to learn from one another. Those are initiatives that would be very important that the ISC could promote. And then, of course, the ISC, I think, can play a key role to try to overcome these barriers that are political barriers for people to go around the world and participate in collaborations and things like that. I think that it's a huge role there for the IST.
Great, thanks for that. Natalie, you or any of your colleagues from the geo unions?
Perhaps, if someone wants
to
respond.
No, it's all you for now.
Oh, okay. I will tell you. Just, I think that firstly, I think that yes, to have some initiative to help the scientific of different disciplinaries to collaborate, to work together, and also perhaps to help to work at different scales, because as you know, we have different scale. We are in a sort of a global world, global scientific world. But many of us, we are also teachers, and we work each day with our students in the first year of the university, second year of the university. And we need also to, I don't know for ESA, but we need also to have that in mind when we work together in an international initiative, because we don't work only for us, we work also for them. And we need to create also this link, because for them it's just huge, it's just in the sky. It's not real. And we need to find the way to link this also scales. Sorry, please, perhaps someone from GeoUnion.
Yes, please go ahead from the Geo Union.
Yeah, okay. I was the former president of ISPS, International Society for Quantum and Remote Sensing. I have one comment. You see, now have 5 years to go towards 2030. I think we need to consider to prepare a new, better 15 years agenda towards 2045 or 2050. My question is that how ISC, even UNESCO, will work on that by mobilizing all the resources of national members, unions, and fellows. I think it's time we need to start work. The other thing is that I think, as I understand, current 17 SDG goals and 2032 indicators are well defined, but could not well reflect the terrestrial dimension of our Earth. So for your unions, we have 10 members, 10 unions. How could we work together to define and to more better indicators and sub-goals or goals for the next 15 years new agenda. So my question is that, you see, I see as an umbrella of national bodies and unions and fellows, how could you make a synergy of all the resources, let people to work to provide more solutions? Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for that challenge in pulling together to redefine some of the sustainability agenda.
Let me mention that we are going to have a meeting of category 1 members, so it's mainly scientific unions on the 29th at 9, and we can discuss that.
Fantastic. Any more questions from the audience? So, some issues. Yes. Thank you. One over here. Please go ahead.
Yes. I'm a geographer, and I was president of IGU in the past. And I was very happy to hear from Peter Kirkman that IC is improving the relationship with the UNESCO. And when I talked with him in the past, saying that including primary and secondary and other education is very important, he said that, it's UNESCO's business, has to be, IC cannot devote too much energy from that. But I think it is very important to include primary, secondary, and other education when we talk about it. And now, increasing number of people talk about education, which is very good, especially in relation to IDSSD. I hope that education is very well incorporated in IDSSD, and many people in say here, some of people, when they hear education, it's a higher education only, but it's not a solution. We have to think of the very important role of the interrelationship or cooperation between science and education, and without that, we can't talk about the future. The future generation needs a very good education, and also the scholars, scientists, we can learn a lot from younger people, not only the students. And so it should be the main issue of IDSSD. I hope we can improve the situation in IDSSD.
Thank you. I'll just respond very briefly to that from the ISC perspective, which is that this idea of transdisciplinary education is something that is on the agenda at the moment and speaks very much to what Daniel has said about embedding students in that kind of culture from the get-go. Okay, one last question. Please go ahead.
I would like to have some clarification. I worked on the International Year for Sustainable Development with Michel, Spiro, Luc Lallemand, and we worked on the promulgation of the Decade of Science for the General Assembly of 25 August 2003. But what is now, we prepare a program for 2055. Which canal we use? Which channel we have to use? As we have understood when working on the International Year of Sustainable Development, the coalition Earth Humanity is serving the Decade of Science. We have a budget for the coalition, and we prepare a scientific program for this year. We have to send it to UNESCO or to the coalition Earth Humanity. I have some confusion. For me, the coalition is serving the decade. And now it seems that there is a separate objective, separate action plan of the coalition and of the decade. And the program we prepare, is it for the coalition or is it for the decade of science?
So maybe I can just invite you to come and chat to us after the session about that. These are all initiatives that are aligned under the umbrella of the decade, but we can clarify any of the details afterwards. Be great. So I think we have to wrap this session up now, and I'd just like to give each of our panelists maybe just 30 seconds each to kind of just specify what you think the most important action point is going forward here for our community.
So I think that since this is a decade, we need to think of a transformative actions. And so if we can change the cultural framework of how science is produced and how it relates to society, that would be a great achievement, of course.
I think the shift between competition to cooperation, really working together, as Daniel was saying, and also the other colleague, if we can really work together without having egos, who leads what, who does what, but really, really use this decade as a science community, as stakeholders in the science arena that can really, really fostering science for all and the right of science. By working together, I think we have started the most transformative journey possible. Because until now, you hear social science, natural science, basic science, applied science. When we stop classifying the sciences and we say the scientific community as a whole, it's embarking in this journey, this transformative journey, I think we will really have a chance with this decade and the many international years.
Thank you. I agree with the both of you, Lydia, and also for someone for Youth Humanity Coalition. I think it's very important to link with social science and physical science, and also to work together, to collaborate, to transform something for the next decade, and also to join the society. I mean, because if not, we are just in a box, and we need to be linking with the society. And I hope that at the end of this decade, some initiative, something that we can propose to change, not only for stakeholder, for policies, but also for societies, for people in the society, citizen and consumer. I agree. I really did do the difference, because this is my domain of research, and I know that there is a real difference between citizen and consumer. We will have something to change. We will succeed to change something.
I can just echo this. I think the more emphasis should be put on working with citizens, ask people about what they think about sustainability transition, how it can be done, instead of having isolated scientific discussions, because that's one of the things we have learned in the past, that we can have science-based solutions, but if they are not perceived to be fair by public, they cannot be implemented politically. And considering the current political and social backlash against stringent or relatively ambitious climate policy, for example, in the EU, I think that much more work should be done in this respect. But again, we have some really great examples, for example, how ambition can be put on a higher level. For example, in Ireland, when policymakers, citizens, and scientists really work closely, so they knew how the political opposition will frame their attack against climate policy, and then science could help actually to frame it in a way that is acceptable for citizens and therefore to politicians as well. So I encourage everyone to look in this direction. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think I'd just like to thank the speakers of the session and a really fantastic audience as well. And maybe just to close on a quote that I heard via a few streams, but it was about natural science can get vaccines to the ports, but it's social science that gets vaccines into arms. And so it's really that kind of working together that is required to realize the ambitions of this decade and of the sustainability agenda. Thank you.